Do you think that there's anything that could be done intrinsically in the way that we run our country?
I do.
That will change this from happening?
Yes, I do.
And then what is that?
I think you can't tell people to stop a thing without giving them a thing. I think if you look at the places where violence is the highest, it's the place where opportunity is the least pervasive. And I think it's really, if you took a rose and a weed, they're all trying to do the same thing. They're trying to survive, and they're fighting for resources. I think people weren't intended to live. Like, people always go, well, black people are like crabs in the bucket. Well, the problem with that scenario is crabs don't belong in a bucket.
They belong in the ocean.
They don't belong in this environment. They don't belong in this hopeless, violent, dirty, gritty, environmentally compromised environment. You know, they did this thing, and when I wrote one of my books, I talked about, they noticed that crime dropped precipitously, and it wasn't turning on laws and more policing, cleaning up the environment, taking the lead out of paint, taking the lead out of pipes, taking the lead out of gas, lowered the crime rate.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
You know what else lowered the crime rate? The passing of abortion.
You think that lowers the crime rate? The passing?
Yeah, Malcolm Gladwell went into this in his book, The Outliers, where he basically broke down. Remember the book? So basically, what he said was, once they passed legal abortion nationally, you looked at 15 to 20 years down the line, and the crime rates plummeted because suddenly you took out all these kids that are being born under horrible circumstances.
Two people that didn't want them.
Two people that didn't want them.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're right. I remember hearing that.
Suddenly you have a kid who is in this single-family environment, who's in an environment with a teenage mom, in a very poor environment, abusive home where you don't really want to have a kid with this person or whatever else. You just take them out of the equation. And, I don't think it's rocket science to say that a lot of kids in that environment will probably grow up to be criminals because they're growing up in horrible environments.
It is.
Right?
It is not. It would be different than the pathway that's generally laid out. Yeah. What's so funny? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was watching something today, and they're like 45,000 children up for adoption in California. 45,000. Or some huge number. And people are talking about they love families. Well, go get some of those kids.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like the argument.
We want children, but we only want them to say we had them. We don't want to take care of them. We want to educate them. We want to make sure. Like, I remember Donald Trump was talking about, they're aborting babies after they're born. That's not a post-birth abortion. That is a school shooting is what the fuck that is. I don't know what you...
I mean, it's similar to the argument of, I remember I saw a documentary about this, how they always say that bad neighborhoods have bad schools.
Right.
But you could also argue that bad schools create bad neighborhoods.
You
have a bad school with horrible teachers, with a 50% dropout rate. What's happening with the kids that are dropping out of school?
Exactly.
They're not starting their own businesses. They're hanging out, doing nothing, getting into trouble.
Right.
And then that creates more crime and brings down the whole neighborhood. And the next year, another 50% of, freshmen and sophomores are getting dumped into this neighborhood without anything to do.
I went to my old neighborhood, went during COVID, and Avalon Gardens, I gave out masks. Do you know Avalon Gardens looked the same way 50 years later as it did when I went there? And it all is metal bars and gates. It all looks it looks right now like a prison school. It looks like a prison yard. And they look that way. And I think that it's no reason, it's no secret that you become convinced of an environment, you get comfortable with it, and it becomes the perpetuation of all you know. Yeah. So I think that you have something to that. I think that's right.
Yeah, I mean, I've always told people, like, if you really want to be successful, go and get a successful friend and hang out with them.
Yeah.
I grew up lower middle class. My parents always barely scraped by, but I had rich friends in junior high and high school, and I got to go to their mansions and hang out and see what it was like. And I liked it.
Right.
And I said, one day I'm going to do this. And these days I've done it. But I had to see it. I had to experience it. I had to see what it was like to have a vacation house. My friend Mark Avanesian had a vacation house in Lake Tahoe.
Right.
It was so dope. You know, my friend Jim Wong had a mansion in Hillsborough. And he had a Benz in high school. I'm like, okay, when I have kids one day, I want to give him a Benz. And he had Rolexes. I want a Rolex one day. Like, I've achieved all this over the years, but I had to see it and touch it.
It's aspirational.
Yeah, because it's one thing to see it on the internet and so forth. It doesn't feel real. But when you actually are in there and seeing it and experiencing it, like, yo, it's cool to have your friends that are bummy, but have a few friends that are not. And see how it changes your life.
The biggest influence on a child's life is someone his age. That's their peer group. But black women are the most educated segment of our society, right? And that phenomenon happened after what? The Cosby Show, A Different World. Cosby Show had a spinoff called The Different World. Different World was about HBCUs. All those black women, who are now black women, these accomplished women, saw that and started enrolling in HBCUs. And 20 years later, you have this iteration of women who are the most educated because they saw a thing and did a thing. I think when you watch Tiger Woods play golf or the Williams sisters play tennis, you know, it is something, seeing a thing and doing a thing. It's like now when you see people lauding people who are academics as opposed to athletes, it'll be the same thing.
Yeah, I agree. Last question.
If a girl will give you some pussy because of your GPA as opposed to your 40 time, it'll get a lot better then.